Welcome to Fine Wine Agency TV. I have with me today Nick Spencer, winemaker of Eden Road Wines, in town all the way from Australia. Let's welcome him to the program and let's taste some wines. We have Nick's whole lineup here for tasting this afternoon, and I'm really psyched about tasting these wines. Nick, what can you tell us about your winery?
We're only a small winery in Canberra, which is about 300 kilometres south of Sydney. We're I guess in an area that is defined as cool climate. It's a really cool area. It's situated about 700 metres above sea level, and that's ultimately what gives it its cool climate. And the area that we're based around New South Wales, around Canberra and Gundagai and Hilltops, are very well regarded for being some of the best places in Australia for growing cool climate Shiraz. So those are the three wines we've got today, and it's a really interesting story. It's this style of wine that we'll taste. They're very sort of medium-bodied and elegant and pretty styles of wine. They're not that sort of high octane, big high alcohol style of Shiraz that perhaps people have become familiar with from Australia.
Unfortunately so. I mean, as an American, I'll admit that there is a little bit of a bias. Thankfully not as much so here in New York, where we're a bit more open-minded about wines, but we tend to associate Shiraz, Aussie Shiraz in particular, as being big, high alcohol, jammy, and something you have a glass of that you can practically chew. And
yeah, that's exactly. We joke that you can, you can stick a fork in some of the wines and they stay upright. they're so big and powerful. This is a completely different style. If you were to sort of look at it from a masculine and feminine point of view, these are much more feminine styles of Shiraz. We certainly don't like to compare because we're in Australia, but they're, I guess, modelled around, or they're probably more familiar to styles from the Northern Rhone.
Sure.
than you would perhaps compare with a typically Australian Shiraz. So it's a really exciting. They're ultimately really food-friendly styles of wine, and it's the kind of wine that people are really starting to drink now in Australia. It's everyone. Wine's a trendy thing, but I don't think this is a trend because it's ultimately a lifestyle choice. These styles of wine, they're food-friendly, they're elegant, and I think these are the styles of wine that perhaps we should be seeing more of in the US, and that I hope we will see more of.
Agreed. It's a style of wine that we like to drink as well here. I mean, it's old world wines in particular, I think, are very popular just because of the things you mentioned: low alcohol, elegance, and food friendliness. So it's about time that we had the same in Australian wines. It's about time that we actually started drinking authentic wines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drink.
And the irony is there's an incredible amount of this style of wine being produced in Australia, and it's I think this style of wine really represents a cool climate swing, away from those really hot, warm areas in Australia to cooler climate styles of wine, not only with Shiraz but with Chardonnay, Riesling, Cabernet, and those sort of varieties as well. So
wonderful. Let's taste through them. Where do we start?
So we'll start with the Long Road, which is the name behind, the reason behind the name, the Long Road, was this is ultimately a wine that we'd like to, I guess we call it our house style of wine. It's a wine that we'd like, the style is the kind of wine that we'd like to become really well recognised for. And the Long Road ultimately represents this sort of, long journey to establishing a brand and making wine. It's it is literally a long road. All the hard work that goes into making these wines is kind of it's quite fitting, the name. But the wine is from an area called Gundagai, which is just west of Canberra.
getting such great aromatics. And just such a lively wine.
Yeah, it is. We, kind of joke around. It's a nice, bouncy, bright wine. Interestingly, this wine was matured in no new oak at all, and no small barrels either. It was only matured in big 500 litre puncheons, which are big oak barrels, and about 30% was matured in stainless steel as well. So we're kind of after that really lovely, pretty, bright fruit characteristic, and that nice, supple, sort of elegant tannin structure as well. So.
Definitely not something you would stick a fork in. By no means. Lovely, lovely wine. What's in our next glass?
So the next glass is a very small run of Shiraz that we do from the same vineyard as the Longroad. It's we go around. We've got a bunch of different blocks within the vineyard that we source from, and we go around and select the best possible fruit. It may only be 1 or 2 tons. In this case, it was about 2 tons. So it's really not a lot of fruit, but it's all hand-picked. It's given the raw treatment in the winery, which is again a bit ironic. In other words, we basically let it do its own thing. We don't really we ultimately don't change our winemaking across all 3 wines, and there's a reason behind it. What we're trying to do is just express terroir in the wine. So we don't make the wines exactly the same across the board. It's not a recipe, but what we're trying to do is, if we can stick to a pretty similar winemaking style across all 3 wines, we can really start seeing terroir being expressed, and in particular in these 2 wines, which are from 2 different regions.
Certainly, it's stylistically very similar, but just so many different nuances. Quite a bit more going on in mid-palate. Again, just a lovely wine. Not to say that the Longroad wasn't a complex wine. It is. This just has another layer of complexity going on.
And this is this fruit comes off red volcanic soil, and it's it's very, very red soil. It's very high in ironstone, and I see a lot of that coming through. I see crushed rocks and minerality and a really sort of ferrous graphite character coming through in the wine, which to me is really exciting because that is ultimately the soil speaking and terroir really speaking. So
Truly, no, this is a lovely, lovely wine, and just so much minute complexity. And fun.
So the last one is from the Hilltops, which is about 180 kilometres northwest of Canberra. So we're at a higher latitude now, but we're also at a higher altitude. This sits at about 650 metres above sea level, whereas Gundagai sits at about 450 metres above sea level. So it's whilst it's higher in altitude, it's further north in terms of latitude. So the climates are probably relatively similar. Hilltops is perhaps marginally warmer. It's an old cherry and stone fruit growing area, the Hilltops, and now there's there's been a lot of Shiraz being planted. But the wine, the only big difference in terms of winemaking here is that this has about 1% of Viognier, which has been co-fermented in the wine. So that's ultimately the only difference in winemaking. But clearly, it's a very different wine.
The aromatics on this wine are off the chart. This is just, I could swirl this in my glass and just sniff it all day. Well, no, I couldn't. I'd drink it. I'd want to drink a lot of this wine, either on its own or with various foods. It's just,
it's got a very
stunning wine.
Very, very silky palate. The Gundagai is a little bit bigger in terms of structure, but and Hilltops is a lot sort of silkier and aromatic, and with the Gundagai wine I see a lot of bright red fruit and some darker fruits. With Hilltops I see a lot of pepper and spice, and the Chinese 5-spice or Szechuan pepper, and it's a really exotic, really interesting wine.
It is. No, and the differences that you mentioned just got me to thinking it. One could almost say, and certainly it's not the exact parallel, but sort of a stylistic difference between a good Côte Rôtie and a good Hermitage.
Yeah, exactly right.
Similar wines, but stylistically just definite differences in terroir. And these, I mean, these are classic terroir-driven wines.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. We strongly believe that it's ultimately the terroir where we can offer a unique wine. You know, as a winemaker, winemaking is a unique process, and we make, individual winemakers make unique decisions along the way. But ultimately, it's a craft that can be copied, or that is not really that unique. As in, anything that I can do, you can do exactly the same. Where we can offer, you know, a real sense of uniqueness is through terroir. You know, you can't copy this soil type, you can't copy this vineyard, and so it's that's if we can express terroir in the wines, that's how we can make these wines really, really unique. So,
well, we're extraordinarily proud to have these wines in our lineup, and just very happy to have them in New York as well. It's about time that New Yorkers and Americans as a whole got to appreciate terroir-driven Australian wines, especially since we've become rather obsessed with terroir as a concept, and let's embrace it in its totality and start realizing that New World regions have it as well. So,
absolutely.
Nick, cheers.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Try these wines. It's I wish you could taste them right now because they're absolutely stunning. Cheers.